Hello, welcome to Ask Conti. My name is Conti Moore Smith. I'm a family law attorney here in the Central Florida area, and I have Cabby with me. So, Cabby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Cabby Brooks. I'm a mental health professional in the Melbourne, Florida area.
And so, Cabby, thank you so much for joining us today. We have received so much good feedback about the videos and the information that we're putting out there as a resource to people. So thank you for taking the time to hop back on to Ask Conti to help us help others figure out what to do in situations that we're discussing. So let's talk about parental alienation. In family law cases, this topic comes up more than it should. I
Mhm.
always advise my clients to be the reasonable parent and do not alienate the children from the other parent. But sometimes you can't control what your client wants to do, and you see it a lot. So let's just talk about what does parental alienation looks like and some tips to help parents co-parent with the other parent. So do you want to talk about generally parental alienation, and I can talk about what I see in our cases?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me. So parental alienation in short is when a parent intentionally or subliminally tries to create a negative narrative about the other parent to their child. And it causes the child to, have confusing feelings about that parent. Sometimes it causes them to, not want to visit that parent. And so a lot of people end up in these situations. A lot of times they already know what's happening, but for those parents that don't really know, why has my child suddenly changed, you may be experiencing parental alienation. And a few things that will help you identify those things, an abrupt change in your child's behavior. Like all of a sudden, they don't want to visit you. Um, everything was fine at one point, and then the next week, they don't want to visit you. And it sounds a lot like your ex is, giving them information, and now their speech about you sounds like your ex's speech about you. Those are two ways to pinpoint that you may, be a victim of parental alienation. And
And parental, just let me chime in.
Mhm.
Parental alienation, there's different levels of it, right?
Yes.
So, there's, some minor, oh, well, your dad has a new girlfriend or, whatever
Right.
else. And people may not consider that parental alienation, but it still is. And then you
Yeah.
have extreme cases where, you're not going to be able to see your child because you moved on, and I'm not going to let you see my child and or our child until the judge, orders it. And I had a case where that happened. I had
Mhm.
a father who did not want to be with the mother anymore, but and he was an awesome father, dad to the kids. And the mom, kept saying, "You're not going to see the kids until the judge orders it, not until the judge orders it." And so it was really hard for him because he had to wait 9 or 10 months before we could get into trial. But we encouraged him to keep asking. And she kept
Mhm.
saying, she was consistent, not until the judge orders it. So when we got to trial, we literally went through all of the text messages. It was like, Your Honor, she said 60 times that he couldn't see his children until the judge ordered it. So now we're here, Your Honor, because we need you to make her allow him to have access to his children. And so it
Right.
wasn't a good look to her. And so it's just the little manipulation, the little things you're saying to the kids. That's parental alienation. I mean, it is
Yeah.
what it is. Like, don't
Yeah.
try to, sugarcoat, like, oh, I just said no. If you're telling the child something negative about the parent, you're trying to change how the child looks at their parent,
Yes.
right? And so for me and for our firm, we don't want to represent the parent that's doing that. We want the reasonable parent. Okay. There's never a circumstance that it's okay for the children to know what's going on.
Right.
Right. Keep the children out of your mess. Keep the
Yes.
children out of the divorce, out of the breakup,
Yes.
because it impacts the kids.
It does, and what people don't realize, that it has very negative effects on their children. It increases their anxiety. It makes them feel lonely because if you think about it, the two people in the world that are assigned to love me, protect me, now can't make decisions regarding me or regarding each other. Who are the children going to talk to about this? They get torn. They don't know, which parent to trust at times, even though it's just one parent doing it. Sometimes they, get a little bit torn and they don't know which parent to trust. They feel like they're responsible for their parents' emotional well-being. And anytime you're exposing children to things that, adults are responsible for, you're causing trauma and anxiety in that child. It may not show up, in that instant, but it will show up at some point in their life.
Right. And so you're basically making your issues your children's
Mm-hmm.
issues. And
Yes.
even though if that person wasn't a good partner or a good spouse, that does not mean that they cannot be a good parent. So
Right.
you have to separate out, because where we see it most of the time is, oh, so and so cheated on me, and because they cheated on me, I don't think it's fair for me to have to let my child go over there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
about you, right?
Right.
It's not about you. And so I see a lot of situations where people are putting their feelings, they're putting their
Yes.
hurt, they're putting, I'm saying,
Yes.
before the best interests of their children. And I want to make a PSA announcement. We want the reasonable parents at our
Right.
firm. We don't want the people who are trying to alienate the child from the other parent. Okay.
Yes.
Because I have never seen a creative way, like, or I mean, we know what you're doing. Like,
Right.
it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that you're trying to alienate the child from the parent. Like, we know
Right.
exactly what you're doing. I've seen a case where a parent had a child read a letter that the parent wrote on Facebook. It's like, you're
Oh
damaging.
no.
It
That's
was it,
awful.
it was heartbreaking, right? The parent wrote the letter and the child read the letter as if they wrote the letter, right? And so there's different levels of what some parents will do to try to get back at the other parent, and it's not worth it. You're
Right.
damaging your children.
You
You
are
are,
damaging your children.
you're not. It's not helping your cause at all. And we all know what you're doing.
Yeah. And even without them speaking what they're doing later in life, that child is gonna figure out what happened in that situation all of the time. The most of the time they figure out, wow, this was my mom. My dad never not wanted access to me, So like you said, it damages the child. So why does this happen? Like I did some research, and I'm, thinking about parents that have that tendency to, want to alienate their child from the other spouse. And I know all too well that it happens in high conflict relationships where it's time to dissolve the relationship, and one party probably cannot take it, and this is their last plea to control their spouse or their ex, to either come back or to hurt them in a way, and they use their children, like you said before, as pawns. It happens a lot of times when you've had a narcissistic. We talked about that word last month, when you've had a narcissistic spouse, and this is how they use their children to control other people, or to get that last thing that they want, and that's to control you emotionally. It happens in emotionally immature individuals. And I know that you said we don't want those clients. Yeah, those are the type of clients that you probably don't want, because it's going to be a hassle, to try to get them to understand and to think rationally about their situation. So you just have to be careful and decide for yourself what you're going to do when you're in this situation. So I don't know if you want me to go on, but I do have some tips for those that
We need all of the tips.
are okay. So,
Please.
so if you find yourself in this type of situation, I think the most important thing for you to do is to stop and decide that you're going to be that parent that does not use your child as the pawn. And how you do that is to not speak on your ex.
Mhm.
Just simply don't speak on the situations that are going on between you and the other adult in their life. At this time, you're probably experiencing grief because of the loss of the relationship. Your spouse is experiencing grief. Your child is experiencing grief. So be that constant in their life, that protective place that they can come to, when they're having issues, and that person that they can come to and have that conversation about what's bothering them. Because I can tell you, if you're going to engage with that spouse, your child is alone in this. They don't trust that they can come to you. So decide that you're going to put your child first, the relationship with their parent, even though it's hard. Respect that relationship, even though that parent is trying to, alienate you. Speak positive things and let that child know, hey, regardless of what goes on between the adults in your life, I am here for you. love your mom. Regardless of what happens, I want you to love your mom. I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between your mom and I. And I say mom, I don't want to get in trouble for just, using, I know men do this
Mom or
too.
dad. Yeah,
Right,
it
mom or
goes both
dad. Right,
ways.
right.
It goes
So
both ways.
it goes both ways. Tell that child to love that other parent and that you're not going to get in the way of that. It takes a bigger person to do that, but yeah, and at
And
the
get
end,
some counseling. Get
right.
some counseling to help
Yeah,
you
that was my next.
get to the point to where
Yeah,
you can be the bigger person for the sake of your
absolutely.
children.
Get some counseling because chances are, if you are the person that's alienating your other spouse, you're not over it, dear. Like you are still stuck on that situation. You're still stuck on the relationship. You're still trying to control things that you have no control over. And I think therapy is a great space for you to process all of those thoughts, not to put that on your child. So get some therapy.
And I don't think people understand like the comments you make to your children about the other person, like how you're kind of backing your child into a corner,
Yeah.
right? Like you may not think, but I mean, but you really are because you're trying to
Right.
make that child choose between who's right, who's wrong, or to look
Yeah.
at the other parent differently. Like it really is a bad look,
Yeah.
um, to put your kids in that situation.
Yeah, and some people like to send subliminal messages. They'll be like, "Well, you
Yes,
need to be ready because your dad is always angry when you're not ready." That is parental alienation. That let that
all of it.
come to their
That's like
yes,
let's not sugarcoat it. The little slick comments,
exactly,
or ask your mama, she got a new boyfriend, like all of that.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. All of that is
All
parental alienation, and you're
right,
wrong for that. If you're doing that, you are wrong for that. You're wrong for trying to create a narrative in that child's mind. They are smart. They're going to figure things out on their own. So just be that protective space. Don't be the person that are doing these things. You're tearing your children apart.
absolutely. What
Yeah.
other tips do you have, Cabby, for trying to co-parent? Because it's hard when you
Yeah.
split up and you're trying to grieve you're grieving the loss of the relationship and you're upset about what happened. Like, what other tips do you have for people out there who are trying to co-parent and not alienate their children from the other parent?
What I want people to understand, another tip I have is to understand that if you are someone that is trying to alienate your child from their other parent, you're essentially withholding love from that child. Because, like
Hmm.
you said before, if that parent is a great parent, they may have been a horrible spouse, they cheated, they didn't wash the dishes, or they wouldn't help you around the house. But, step outside of yourself and think about that person as a parent. If that person is a good parent, was always there for your child, protected your child, loved your child, then you are essentially withholding love from that child. And I don't know any person in this world that could use less love. So that's one thing that I want, them to think about. What is the worst case scenario is that they receive more love if you allow your child to be around that parent. And maybe think about some therapy between you and that other parent if you're at a place where that can happen. Sometimes you can't be in the room with that parent, or things are just that heated that does not work out. But think about how you all can come together and gain some skills. Again, it takes being the bigger person to help your child along this process, and put yourself last. Like, put your child ahead of yourself. And the last thing is to say nothing. Like, we got to go all the way back to the things that grandma taught us, right?
Right.
So if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
It doesn't help.
It does
It
not.
doesn't help.
It doesn't help. And it destroys your child, because every single thing, you have to remember that your child is an extension of your ex, that they come from. They probably look like, they talk like, walk like. So the things that you say, your child takes to heart, and you're tearing them apart. So if you don't have anything nice to say, go back to the lessons that grandma taught you. Just be quiet. Don't say anything, and work on your relationship with your child. Work on you being their protective place that they can come to, when they're upset about something.
No, agreed. And
Yeah.
so I see a lot of parental alienation happening when one party has moved on and the other
Hmm.
has not, right?
Yes.
And so I don't want that person picking up my child, or I don't. And it's like, you have to, if you're not going to be together, you have to expect that at some point both of you will move on.
Right.
And so, if you need to get some counseling to help you cope with or deal with the new normal, do that.
Yeah.
But trying to ask your children a million questions about the other person, and like it's not helpful. If you have a question, go to the other parent and address the question or concerns you have with that parent, and don't ask your children 20 questions. Like that. I mean, you ask a million questions and letting them know that you don't trust that the other parent made a good decision about who they're having around the children or around your
Right.
child. So,
Right.
like, asking a million questions is not helpful either. If you're asking the child who doesn't really know the answer, you need to ask the spouse or the
Right.
ex-spouse or the ex-partner.
And again, think about the emotional damage that you're doing to that child, because I don't know a child in the world that if they see or feel or sense, they're little human beings. They feel, they sense, they see that their parent may be upset or not pleased by this. They are going to immediately switch into trying to be responsible for your emotional well being. And that tears children apart. That's not their responsibility. So, like you said, go to the other adults or be the bigger person and have that conversation with your child. Hey, I know things look different right now. Dad and I are working things out, or mom and I are working things out. And I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between us. He's chosen who he's chosen. And I know that they're going to do the best for you, protect you, and love you. And I'm going to do the same. And just leave it. That will be the best conversation you can have with your child versus just throwing out little nuggets and leaving them to deal with those things alone. It's traumatizing.
It is. And
Mhm.
so I guess from this our ask content today, I want people to understand that even little slick comments, that's parental alienation.
Yeah,
Don't do it.
yeah,
The extreme side of that, with not allowing your children to see the other parent, or finding an excuse. Like what gets me every time is someone says, "Oh, they're a felon." Well, they were a felon when you can see the child. So why
right,
does it matter now,
right,
right? Like, why
right,
does
I
that
know,
matter now? It wasn't an issue then. So, like,
right,
check yourself. So,
yeah,
check yourself. Make sure that you remove yourself, put your children first, and
yes,
then move that way. You can never lose by putting your children first.
never lose. That's awesome, and that's, I think, is the biggest point, that you can never lose when you put them first. Put them above what you're feeling, and let your therapist help you with those things. It's not your child's responsibility. We're happy to help. Happy to help. We have an entire clinical study on how to break up, how to deal with your own emotional issues, and let that spouse live, and let that relationship between your spouse and their child live. So
Right. And I've never seen someone succeed in parental alienation without the court or somebody else calling it out for what it is.
right,
So just save yourself, the money, go to a therapist,
yeah,
figure out how to cope and deal with breaking up,
yeah,
figure out how to be the best parent you can for your child, figure out how to co-parent with the other person, and
yeah.
move on,
Move
right?
on.
Don't try to get caught in these arguments that are just ridiculous and that aren't going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, because the judge, if you go to trial, is going to see what you're doing. We
Yeah.
see it all the time. It's not anything that's new. There's no creative way to try to alienate a child. We've seen all the different ways you can try to do it.
Right.
Right, so get the help you need to be the best person that you can be and the best parent that you can be.
Right. Because you can manipulate and fool a child for a little period of time, but you're not going to be able to manipulate a judge. They're going to see right through it. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Get
And
it
so there's
together now.
right, and there's experts that you could pay to, I mean, it could get really expensive, but it's, I've never seen someone, be so creative in how they do it. Like, we know what you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
so don't do it. So
Right.
and don't put your kids through it. So, Cabby, how can people find you? If they need help, how can they find you? They're breaking up, but they want help. How do they reach out to you to get your help?
Okay, so reach out to me via my website, empoweredprosper.com. You can go right on there, book a free 15-minute consult. We can talk about if we're a good fit for each other, just a little bit about what you're going through. And then you can also reach out to me at 321-328-0422.
All right. And again, I'm Conti Moore Smith. If you have a family law issue in the Central Florida area, please reach out to us so that we can help you stress less because you chose more. You can find us at Conti Moore Law on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and we have a lot of different videos that we put out on YouTube to be a resource to people to help them through these situations. So please reach out to us. And again, thank you all for tuning in to Ask Conti.